A sharp, agonizing pain burst through my abdomen, knocking every breath straight out of my lungs. I crumpled to the grass, my hands clutching my 6-month pregnant belly, as white-hot shockwave after shockwave tore through my body. The festive mariachi music instantly shattered into horrific screams, but inside my womb, the lively kicks of my unborn baby girl went completely, terrifyingly silent. My husband, Caleb, lunged forward, his face turning as white as a sheet, and caught me before my head hit the stone patio. Just seconds ago, my younger sister Sierra stood over me with a venomous sneer, her pointed leather heels swinging fast and hard directly into my body. To understand how a bright summer afternoon transformed into a bloody crime scene, we have to look back at the quiet cracks that had been forming long before the violence erupted. That morning, the June sun spilled across our bedroom in Lakewood, Colorado, painting warm golden lines over the hardwood floor. The air smelled of freshly ground dark roast coffee and the faint, sweet scent of pine drifting down from the nearby foothills. At 30 years old, I worked as a medical records specialist at a busy regional clinic downtown. My days were spent quietly reading charts, organizing complex data, and identifying the smallest medical anomalies in rows of clinical numbers. It was a precise, solitary job that trained my mind to observe subtle patterns that others usually overlooked. I stood before the full-length mirror, smoothing the fabric of a soft emerald green linen dress over my growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, I felt strong and healthy. Beside me, Caleb was adjusting his tie in the reflection. As a healthcare compliance attorney, Caleb possessed a calm, immovable presence. His dark eyes were steady, his voice low and deliberate, forged by years of navigating strict legal regulations and corporate medical disputes. He stepped behind me, placing his large, warm hand gently over mine. For a moment, our baby girl fluttered beneath our palms, a soft, rhythmic press against my ribs that felt like a secret reassuring promise. Yet, underneath this quiet sanctuary, a heavy exhaustion weighed on my heart. For as long as I could remember, I had played the role of the silent, enduring older sister in the Rodriguez family. Growing up, my parents viewed my quiet efficiency as a license to demand endless sacrifices, while my younger sister, Sierra, occupied the center of their universe. Sierra was 26, volatile, and perpetually discontent. She lived in a world fueled by social media validation, expensive designer clothes bought on credit, and a deep-seated resentment toward anyone whose life appeared stable. While Caleb and I built a modest, grounded life through hard work, Sierra viewed my happiness as a personal insult. Over the past few months, her bitterness had metastasized. Every family gathering became a minefield of passive-aggressive remarks and sharp insults. My mother, Maria, always brushed Sierra's toxic behavior under the rug, calling it just her fiery personality and begging me to keep the peace. I had spent years swallowing my hurt, convincing myself that staying silent was the highest form of sisterly love. Caleb's phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the quiet of the bedroom. I glanced at my own screen and saw 3 unread text messages from Sierra sent at sunrise. The words burned on the glass. "You think you're better than us now, with your lawyer husband. Don't act like a queen at mom and dad's party today." Caleb read the screen over my shoulder, his jaw tightening into a hard, rigid line. His legal mind immediately categorized the threat. He turned me gently to face him, his hands resting on my shoulders. "Maya, this isn't normal sibling rivalry anymore," he said, his tone measured and firm. "She is escalating. Promise me that if she starts anything today, we leave immediately. Our baby's safety comes before family politics." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, though a foolish, hopeful part of me still wished for a peaceful afternoon. I wanted my parents to be happy on their 30th wedding anniversary. I wanted to believe that somewhere inside Sierra, there was still a sister who cared. By 2 in the afternoon, my parents' backyard was filled with 40 guests, laughter, and the rich, savory aroma of grilled meats and sweet tres leches cake. Bright white canopy tents shaded the lawn from the glaring Colorado sun. My father, Hector, was holding court near the patio, his hands rough and weathered from 30 years of physical labor. When he saw us walk through the side gate, his face lit up with genuine pride. He pulled me into a tight hug that smelled faintly of sawdust and Old Spice, placing a heavy hand on my belly with tear-filled eyes. My mother, Maria, rushed over in a burgundy dress, her silver hair styled neatly. She embraced Caleb with warmth, marveling at how handsome he looked. Caleb accepted her welcome with easy grace, completely devoid of pretension despite his high-powered legal career. For the first hour, the afternoon felt almost magical. I let my guard down, allowing the music and family chatter to wash over my anxieties. Then, Sierra stepped out from the back patio doors. She moved with a tense, predatory sharp rhythm, holding a plastic cup filled with clear liquor. She wore a tight designer dress that clashed with the casual backyard setting, and her eyes were fixed directly on me. Her husband, Dustin, trailed 2 steps behind her, looking pale, exhausted, and visibly terrified of what she might do next. Well, Sierra's voice sliced through the background chatter, dripping with sharp sarcasm. Look at the golden couple gracing us common folk with their presence. Caleb immediately stepped closer to my side, placing a protective hand at the small of my back. "Hello, Sierra," he replied, his voice completely calm, an impenetrable wall of professional composure. "It's a beautiful party for your parents." Sierra took a long sip of her drink, her eyes flashing with malice. "Oh, don't pretend you care about this family, Caleb. You just like looking down on us from your high horse." "Sierra, please," I said softly, keeping my posture relaxed to de-escalate the tension. "It's Mom and Dad's anniversary. Let's keep today about them." "Don't tell me what to do, Maya," she snapped, her voice rising sharply and drawing the eyes of nearby relatives. "You sit there in your fancy dress, acting like a saint. You haven't called Mom in weeks, but you show up here showing off your bump like you're the only woman who ever got pregnant. I've been on modified bed rest due to blood pressure complications," I explained, placing a hand over my stomach defensively. "You know that. Always an excuse." Sierra sneered, taking 2 aggressive steps forward. The sharp smell of tequila radiated off her breath. "You used to help Dad with his billing. Now you act like you're too delicate to even speak to us. You think marrying a lawyer makes you royalty? You're just a fake, playing house in the suburbs." Dustin reached out nervously, trying to touch her arm. "Sierra, babe, stop. Everyone is watching." She shoved his hand away violently. "Shut up, Dustin. I'm sick of everyone pretending Maya is perfect." My father hurried over, his face red with sudden anger. "Sierra, that is enough. You will respect your sister in this house. Respect her." Sierra shrieked, her face twisting into an ugly, unhinged mask of rage. "She doesn't care about any of you. She got pregnant on purpose just to lock Caleb down before he realized she has nothing to offer." A collective gasp echoed across the lawn. The mariachi band stopped playing. My mother turned pale, her hands trembling over her mouth. Years of suppressed hurt and silent endurance suddenly snapped inside me. The quiet, passive older sister vanished. I stepped forward, standing at my full height, my voice ringing out with absolute clarity across the dead silent yard. "You are deeply pathetic, Sierra," I said, every word crisp and steady. "You are drowning in your own bitterness because you can't stand seeing anyone happy. You blame the world for your miserable choices, and you take it out on everyone who actually loves you. Sierra's eyes widened in utter shock. Her face turned from flushed red to a ghostly, dangerous white. "What did you say to me?" she whispered, a chilling sound. "You heard me," I replied, standing my ground. "I am done hiding from your tantrums." Time warped into a terrifying blur. Sierra lunged forward. In a fraction of a second, before Caleb or my father could intervene, her right leg swung upward with terrifying speed. Her pointed, leather heel struck my 6-month pregnant belly with brutal, direct force. The impact sounded like a sickening thud. The force threw me backward. The blue sky above spun wildly as the agonizing pain ripped through my midsection, severing my ability to draw air into my lungs. I collapsed onto the grass, doubling over in an instinctual protective curl, clutching my stomach as dark shadows edged my vision. "Maya!" Caleb screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure terror that I had never heard from him before. My father roared in fury, tackling Sierra onto the lawn as Dustin dropped to his knees in horror. My mother began to wail, her hands pressed to her face in utter disbelief. I lay on the cold grass, gasping frantically for air, my trembling hands pressed tight against my abdomen. I closed my eyes and waited. I prayed for a flutter, a kick, a tiny nudge against my ribs, any sign that my baby girl was still alive inside me. There was nothing, only a cold, suffocating, absolute silence. The sterile smell of rubbing alcohol and bleach burned my nostrils as the ambulance doors slammed open. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead in rapid, dizzying streaks as paramedics wheeled my gurney through the double doors of Presbyterian Hospital. Beside me, Caleb walked fast, his large hand gripping mine like a steel clamp. His face was rigid, devoid of color, but his voice stayed dead steady as he rattled off my clinical history to the trauma team. In the examination room, the air felt ice-cold against my bare skin. Dr. Evelyn Vance, my OB-GYN, hurried in, her navy scrubs rustling quietly. She didn't waste time on comforting words. She squirted a blob of clear, freezing gel onto my bruised lower abdomen. I shuddered violently, clutching the edge of the metal bed. "Stay still, Maya," Dr. Vance said, her voice a calm anchor in the swirling panic. She pressed the Doppler probe against my skin. Silence filled the small room. The loud, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock sounded like a countdown. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. My lungs locked tight. I stared at the blank ceiling, tears burning the corners of my eyes, waiting for a sign. Then, a sudden, loud sound burst through the speaker. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A rapid, defiant, galloping beat echoed against the tray tables. "There she is," Dr. Vance whispered, a faint smile breaking through her sharp composure. "Strong heart rate, 140 beats per minute. She was stunned by the shockwave, Maya, but your baby girl is alive." Relief crashed over me, so hard I choked on a sob. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks as Caleb pressed his forehead against mine, his shoulders shaking with quiet, grateful breaths. Dr. Vance kept probing gently, her eyes fixed on the ultrasound screen. "The impact caused localized bruising across your abdominal wall," she explained, her fingers pointing at dark patches on the monitor. "There is no placental abruption, but you are experiencing mild uterine contractions. I am placing you on strict bed rest and fetal monitoring for 24 hours. While the nurse adjusted my foredrip, Caleb stepped out into the quiet hallway. Through the glass partition, I watched his posture shift. The loving husband vanished. The sharp legal mind took over. He pulled out his phone, making swift, calculated calls. Because Caleb was a healthcare compliance attorney, he understood the strict boundaries of legal procedure. He knew that taking direct charge of his own sister-in-law's prosecution would create a massive conflict of interest that Sierra's defense lawyers could exploit later. He needed absolute, bulletproof objectivity. When he stepped back into the room, his eyes were cold gray slate. "Lakewood police just processed Sierra at the station," he said softly, sitting on the edge of my bed. "She is being held on state felony assault charges." I spoke with Officer Ramirez. "I am stepping back from direct legal representation to protect the integrity of the case, but the state prosecutor is filing formal charges tonight." Before I could answer, the heavy wooden doors burst open. My mother, Maria, rushed in, her burgundy dress wrinkled, her eyes swollen and bloodshot from crying. My father, Hector, followed a step behind, looking older, hollowed out, his shoulders hunched beneath his flannel shirt. "Mija," my mother cried out, reaching for my hand. "Thank God. The nurse said the baby is okay." I pulled my hand back, slightly under the white sheet. "She's stable, Mom. We got lucky." My mother sank into the plastic visitor chair, wringing her hands frantically. "Maya, listen to me," she began, her voice trembling with rising desperation. "Dustin called us from the police station. Sierra is in a holding cell. They are talking about felony charges." "Maya, felony." Caleb stood up straight, his tall frame blocking the foot of my bed. "She kicked a pregnant woman, Maria. That is a violent felony in the state of Colorado. She was drunk. She didn't mean it," my mother shrieked, tears streaming down her face as she turned her pleading eyes toward me. "Maya, you have to talk to the police. Tell them it was an accident. Tell them you don't want to press charges. If she goes to prison, her whole life is ruined. She is your baby sister." My father stood silent near the door, staring at the linoleum floor, his jaw working tightly. I looked at my mother's tear-stained face. For 30 years, this was the familiar script of my family. Whenever Sierra threw a violent tantrum, destroyed property, or hurled venomous insults, my parents rushed in to shield her from the consequences. They demanded my silence to protect her feelings. They called it family loyalty. A cold, crisp clarity settled deep inside my chest. The quiet, passive older sister who always swallowed her hurt died on that backyard lawn. I sat up slowly, adjusting the hospital gown over my bruised belly. I looked directly into my mother's eyes, my voice dropping an octave, completely devoid of fear or hesitation. "Sierra didn't slip, Mom," I said, every word cut like glass. "She looked me in the eye, raised her heel, and kicked your unborn granddaughter with full force. Your enablement over the last 20 years gave her that shoe. My silence ends today. I am not dropping a single charge." My mother gasped, recoiling as if I had struck her. My father raised his head, staring at me in stunned, heavy silence. Outside the hospital window, night fell over Denver, painting the glass in dark reflection. I laid my hand flat over my belly, feeling the tiny, faint flutter of my daughter kicking back. I was no longer waiting to be saved. 2 days after leaving the hospital, I sat at my kitchen table in Cherry Creek. Sunlight filtered through the glass windows, warming the oak wood. The sharp scent of freshly sliced lemons and herbal tea filled the room. On my lap sat a textbook on personal financial planning, alongside my daily prenatal health log. I was no longer the passive woman weeping into her pillow. The mindset shift was absolute. I stopped asking why my family hurt me. I took full ownership of my physical recovery, my child's future, and my own independence. Caleb walked in, setting down a heavy manila folder. Behind him stood Dustin, Sierra's husband. Dustin looked broken. Dark circles bruised his eyes, and his hands trembled as he placed a sleek black smartphone and a stack of printed bank statements onto the table. "I can't cover for her anymore, Maya," Dustin whispered, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "She is destroying everything. You almost lost your baby. I found these hidden in her closet. Dustin turned and walked out, leaving the evidence behind. I pulled the documents closer. As a medical records specialist, my entire professional life was built on auditing complex data sets, spotting hidden discrepancies, and cross-referencing digital entries. Where others saw a confusing mess of numbers, I saw a clear chronological story. I spent the next 48 hours submerged in data. I cross-analyzed Sierra's secret bank records with her text logs. My eyes burned under the desk lamp as I highlighted transaction codes and time-stamped messages. A distinct pattern emerged. Over the past 6 months, Sierra had received bi-weekly wire transfers totaling over $40,000 from a shell corporation named Apex Consulting. I traced the tax identification number of Apex Consulting through public corporate registries. The ultimate beneficial owner was a man named Nathan Drake. I called Caleb into the room. When he saw the name on my spreadsheet, his jaw went slack. Nathan Drake was a disgraced former pharmaceutical executive. 3 years ago, Caleb had spearheaded a massive compliance investigation against Drake for distributing counterfeit, contaminated cancer medications. The lawsuit ruined Drake's career, stripped him of his executive license, and forced his company into bankruptcy. The pieces fell into place with chilling precision. Nathan Drake wanted revenge. He knew Caleb was preparing to lead a new federal compliance audit against a major medical supplier connected to Drake's hidden network. Drake needed Caleb discredited, distracted, or forced to recuse himself due to a public family scandal. Drake had targeted Sierra online, feeding her existing resentment. He paid her thousands of dollars to act as an insider informant, tracking Caleb's schedule, our home address, and my prenatal medical appointments. Then came the darkest revelation. I pulled up the encrypted chat logs between Drake and Sierra from the morning of the party. Drake had instructed Sierra to create a loud, public scene at our parents' anniversary, verbalizing wild accusations to bait Caleb into a physical confrontation that could be recorded and leaked to the press. Drake wanted a minor verbal scandal, but Sierra's deep-seated, venomous jealousy took over. Driven by sheer personal malice, Sierra took Drake's money, stepped beyond his instructions, and deliberately swung her heel into my pregnant stomach. She wasn't just a paid informant. She was a willing predator who upgraded a corporate trap into a violent attempt on my baby's life. A cold, fiery strength surged through my veins. I did not break down. I organized the evidence into a pristine, cross-indexed digital dossier. I created a chronological timeline, linking the wire transfers, IP addresses, and chat logs. An hour later, Special Agent Marcus Reed of the FBI sat in our living room. He was a sharp, broad-shouldered man with steady steel-gray eyes. He spread my printed dossier across the coffee table, reading through the index tabs in silence. "Mrs. Sullivan," Agent Reed said, looking up with genuine respect. "This is cleaner than most analyst reports I receive from my own team. You've established a clear paper trail for federal conspiracy and interstate stalking." Nathan Drake thought he was manipulating an unstable woman, I said, my voice steady, crisp, and completely devoid of emotion. And my sister thought she could hide behind family loyalty. They both miscalculated. Agent Reed packed the files into his leather briefcase and stood up. "Because this involves a targeted attempt to interfere with a federal legal official through extortion and violence, federal arrest warrants are being issued tonight for both Nathan Drake and Sierra Rodriguez." I stood up and shook Agent Reed's hand firmly. When the front door closed, I walked over to the large bay window overlooking our backyard. The afternoon sun bathed the room in bright, amber light. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank portal, transferring my personal savings into a separate, secure account I had established for myself and my daughter. I adjusted my posture, standing tall and grounded. I closed the laptop with a sharp, decisive click. The era of my silence was officially buried. I was ready for court. The heavy mahogany doors of the Denver Federal Courthouse swung open. The air inside smelled of old polished wood, cold stone, and damp wool. Outside, news cameras flashed, but inside courtroom 4B, a heavy silence fell. High oak paneling towered above us. The seal of the United States Federal Court hung high on the marble wall. I sat at the prosecution table in a tailored navy blazer and dark trousers. My 8-month pregnant belly rested firm beneath my coat. I kept my posture straight, shoulders back, chin high. Beside me, Assistant U.S. Attorney Keith Chandler reviewed his legal briefs. Across the aisle sat Sierra. 2 months in federal custody had stripped away her polished exterior. She wore a drab khaki prison jumpsuit. Her hair was dull, pulled back into a messy knot. Her eyes, once sharp with spite, darted nervously around the room. Beside her sat Nathan Drake, dressed in an expensive gray suit, his face a cold, unreadable mask. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Vance. We stood as the judge took her seat at the high bench. The jury was ushered in, 12 men and women whose faces reflected the gravity of the charges: federal conspiracy, interstate stalking, and violent assault. Special Agent Marcus Reed took the stand first. His voice was calm and steady. On a large projector screen, he displayed the evidence I had compiled. Bright red lines connected Nathan Drake's bank accounts to Sierra's secret offshore card. Time-stamped text messages flashed across the screen, showing their months of calculated surveillance. Sierra's defense attorney stood up, trying to paint her as a helpless victim. Agent Reed, the lawyer, argued, "Isn't it true my client was manipulated by Mr. Drake? Isn't she a troubled woman suffering from severe mental instability?" "No," Agent Reed replied, looking directly at the jury. "The digital record shows active participation and financial extortion. She actively solicited higher payments." Then, a USA Chandler called me to the stand. I walked to the witness box, the heel of my shoes clicking firmly on the polished floor. I adjusted the microphone, resting my hand over my stomach. I looked directly at the jury. "Mrs. Sullivan," a USA Chandler asked softly, "can you state your profession for the court?" "I am a medical records specialist," I answered, my voice clear and unwavering. "Did you review the medical data regarding the assault on your 6-month pregnant belly?" "I did," I replied. I picked up the medical exhibits. I analyzed the fetal heart monitor logs and trauma impact charts from Presbyterian Hospital. I pointed to the monitor. The line showed the sudden spike in maternal heart rate, followed by the frightening, flat drop in fetal movement. The impact caused direct abdominal wall bruising and uterine contractions. The shock wave temporarily stunned my baby's heartbeat. Sierra leaned toward her attorney, whispering frantically, her face flushing red. Then came the decisive blow. A USA Chandler introduced the forensic digital report extracted from Sierra's phone memory cache. He read the timestamp aloud. June 14th, 1:15 p.m., exactly 3 hours before the party. "Mrs. Sullivan, can you read the search history recorded on the defendant's phone at that time?" I looked at the screen and read the text aloud, my voice ringing through the silent courtroom like a bell. "Does kicking a 6-month pregnant belly cause immediate miscarriage?" A collective gasp echoed across the gallery. My mother wept loudly in the front row, burying her face in my father's shoulder. My father sat frozen, tears running down his weathered face as the horror of his younger daughter's premeditated cruelty sank in. The defense attorney sank into his chair, unable to offer a single objection. It was not a sudden fit of rage. It was not manipulation by Nathan Drake. It was premeditated violence. Nathan Drake's lawyer tried to sever his client's case, but the paper trail was absolute. Drake had provided the money, Sierra had provided the malice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. The room was dead silent. On the count of federal conspiracy to interfere with a federal official, we find the defendant, Sierra Rodriguez, guilty. On the count of interstate stalking, guilty. On the count of violent felony assault, guilty. Nathan Drake was found guilty on all conspiracy and extortion counts. Judge Vance struck her gavel with a loud, final thud. Sierra Rodriguez, for your premeditated, violent crimes, you are sentenced to 20 years in federal prison without parole. Guard stepped forward, placing steel cuffs around Sierra's wrists. She turned her head, her eyes finally meeting mine. The arrogance was gone. The wild jealousy was extinguished. There was only the cold, hard reality of her choices. I did not glare at her. I did not smile in triumph. I simply held her gaze with steady, peaceful strength. Outside the courtroom, light streamed through the grand glass doors. Caleb took my hand, his grip warm and protective. My father stepped forward, his eyes red and humble. He didn't ask me to forgive Sierra. He simply squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "I am so sorry, Maya. You saved your child." I took a deep breath of the crisp Colorado air. The weight of 30 years of family trauma lifted off my shoulders. I was free. 2 years later, the late afternoon sun cast a warm amber glow over the pine-covered foothills outside Denver. The crisp mountain air smelled of sweet resin, damp earth, and freshly cut lawn grass. Our new home sat quietly against the majestic Rocky Mountain backdrop, a peaceful sanctuary nestled far away from the painful memories and chaos of the past. In the backyard, 2-year-old Hazel ran across the lush green lawn, her joyful, unfiltered laughter ringing out through the quiet valley like wind chimes. She chased our golden retriever, her tiny sneakers thudding softly on the grass as her golden brown curls bounced in the breeze. Her dark eyes mirrored Caleb's calm warmth, but her fierce, stubborn spirit was entirely mine. I stood on the wide back porch, watching them play, my right hand resting gently on the firm curve of my growing belly. Our second daughter, Paige, was due in just 4 weeks. This pregnancy had been everything the first one was not: quiet, healthy, deeply celebrated, and filled with unbroken peace. On the large oak outdoor table lay architectural blueprints, legal filings, and organizational charts. After the trial concluded, Caleb and I knew we could not simply return to our old routine and pretend nothing had happened. We had been granted a painful first-hand look at a unique kind of vulnerability, how internal family dynamics and emotional abuse could be weaponized against public servants and pregnant women. We decided to transform our personal trauma into a shield for others. Together, we founded the Sullivan Center for Family Justice, a nonprofit organization dedicated to offering free legal representation, forensic medical record auditing, and secure housing for women facing internal family threats, stalking, and emotional domestic abuse. My background as a medical records specialist became the backbone of our evidence auditing department, while Caleb handled the legal framework and policy advocacy. What started as an unimaginable tragedy had evolved into our shared life's mission. Caleb stepped out through the glass patio doors, carrying a wooden tray with 2 glasses of iced herbal tea and a bowl of fresh blackberries. He set the tray down on the table, pulled Hazel onto his lap with an easy laugh, and wrapped his free arm firmly around my waist. He kissed my temple, his breath warm against my sun-warmed skin. The general contractor just confirmed that the main building in downtown Denver will be completely finished by Christmas, Caleb said softly, his low voice full of quiet, grounded pride. The crisis shelter beds are installed, and the legal aid clinic is fully staffed. Everything is ready for the grand opening. Watching my husband tickle our daughter until she dissolved into giggles, a profound, overwhelming wave of gratitude washed over me. This normal, beautiful, sun-drenched afternoon was the exact life Sierra and Nathan Drake had tried so hard to destroy. They had sought to break our spirit, ruin Caleb's career, and erase my daughter's future. Yet, sitting here today, it was undeniable that they had failed completely. They had failed, and we had built something enduring from the ashes of their malice. Our broader family dynamics had shifted as well, rebuilding on a foundation of hard-won honesty. My parents had spent the last 2 years attending intensive individual and family therapy to process their decades of unhealthy enablement and rationalization. They no longer made excuses for toxic behavior, nor did they demand my silence to preserve an illusion of family harmony. While the deep scar of having their younger daughter serving a 20-year sentence in a federal penitentiary would never fully fade, my parents had transformed into devoted, respectful grandparents. They poured clean, healthy love into Hazel, strictly respecting the firm personal boundaries I had established. Just a week ago, a thick envelope arrived in our mailbox from the Federal Correctional Facility in Fort Worth, Texas. It was addressed in Sierra's familiar, looping handwriting. 2 years ago, holding such an envelope would have sent a surge of panic through my chest. But as I picked it up, my hands did not tremble. The letter was remarkably short, written on lined yellow notebook paper. There were no wild excuses, no finger-pointing, and no bitter self-pity. Maya, Sierra had written, I know there are no words in the human language that can undo the horror I inflicted upon you and your baby. I live with the crushing weight of my choices every single day behind these concrete walls. I do not write this to ask for your forgiveness, because I know in my heart I have not earned it. I am participating in mandatory anger management programs, taking college courses, and working daily in the prison library. I am finally learning what it means to take full responsibility for my own life instead of blaming the world. I just want you to know that I am deeply, truly sorry. I hope your daughters grow up knowing that their mother is the strongest, most honorable woman I have ever known. I sat quietly on the porch, reading the letter under the afternoon sun. For the first time in her 28 years of life, Sierra sounded like an adult facing reality rather than a spoiled child hiding behind explosive rage. The stark, unyielding walls of federal prison had accomplished what decades of family intervention and coddling could not. I did not weep. I did not feel a sudden surge of lingering bitterness. Instead, I felt a quiet, profound sense of closure settle over my heart. I picked up my pen and wrote a brief, clear response. Sierra, I am glad you are doing the hard work necessary to heal yourself and take responsibility. But my primary duty in this life is the safety, peace, and emotional health of my daughters. For that reason, our lives will remain separate. I wish you peace and genuine transformation on your journey. I sealed the envelope and placed it in the outgoing mail stack. I chose to forgive her in my heart for my own freedom, but I maintained my boundaries to protect my home. True healing did not require inviting poison back into my sanctuary. It meant closing the door firmly, without hatred or regret. I walked down the wooden porch steps and joined Caleb and Hazel on the soft grass. The sun sank lower toward the western horizon, painting the vast Colorado sky in brilliant, sweeping strokes of gold, violet, and molten crimson. A crisp mountain breeze rustled through the aspen leaves overhead, carrying the clean scent of pine. I took a deep, clear breath, filling my lungs completely. I had stopped playing the helpless victim. I had taken full control of my physical health, my finances, my boundaries, and my family's destiny. Standing here in the golden hour, surrounded by the family I had protected with my life, I felt completely free, proud, and at peace. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, The right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. Please like, share, and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Hope to see you on the next page.